Okay, hello everyone. So how is the sound? I found it interesting that some people had trouble recognizing the position in the lower right corner. This is actually a Joseki position that just about everyone would almost immediately recognize, um, probably a couple of decades ago, or maybe a few decades ago. Oh, good. Okay, so I'll get started. Um, but nowadays, no one plays it, so I'm not surprised that people had a bit of trouble recognizing it. So just to talk about the game itself, Seigen and Kitani were two rivals, and they were best friends. They studied together, and together they did invent the new Joseki, the new opening, the new Fuseki. They called it the Shin Fuseki. Which changed how we played Go. So basically, it was when people started playing Star Points and they did all these crazy things for a few years, like they would play the Tengen or they would play the 5-5 point, all sorts of moves that they experimented with. And in the end, it settled down with what we call a modern opening with Star Points and some 3-4 points mostly. So there was this period it was in the early 1930s, early 30s, when they were doing that. And this is after they have decided that they want to go with star points mostly. And so you'll see the players mostly playing star points and 3-4 points in the late 1930s. And that's when this game is. The date on the left here is the date of the game. It was 1939. And this was the second game of most famous Jubango that they played against each other. They played a lot of matches against each other. This was before most of the tournaments had started. So I think the Hoimbo tournament had started up. But apart from that, they didn't really have any tournaments for the professionals. And while they were planning to do that, they started with some sets of matches against top players. So a lot of Jubangos that Seigen played were set up this way. And there was also the fact that his affiliation with the Nihonki there was a period where it was sort of ambiguous. So they had to do something special to get the matches set up instead of, and he wasn't participating in all of the tournaments all of the time. So this is game number 2. I did make a video about game number 1. So I'll put a link in here. Peter Ferncy. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. Thank you very much. So I'll put a link in here just in case anyone wants to copy that and go back later to watch the first game, which was, when I checked it out, it was a few months ago, so it's been a while. I did make a video, or actually it was a live broadcast about game number 1 also. And I will eventually get around to doing all of these games, I hope. So going back to the beginning of the game. Okay, so Seigen was a fan of playing the star point. It was one of his favorite moves. When he was a young player, he was still playing a lot of 3-4 points. There was a period of time when it was considered bad to play the star point. So everyone was playing 3-4 points. And then they invented the Shin Fuseki, the new opening, which focused a lot. For Seigen, it was very much focused on playing star points. There was a famous game where he played a star point and a 3-3 point, and the Tengen. That was against Hoimbo Shusai. I should get to that game at some point also. But he ended up favoring star points. And in this game, you see Kitani playing a star point also. In many of his games, Kitani actually, I think he really preferred the 3-4 point. But in this Jubango, since it's just one player playing against, it's a one-on-one match where they're going to be playing 10 games. You do see the players sort of experimenting a lot and not always playing their own style. So it's in this Jubango especially, I found it very interesting to see how Kitani was changing his tactics. And although Seigen is going to end up winning this Jubango, you have to win 4 more games than your opponent to win the Jubango. And then it changes the handicap. So they're playing uneven at this point, and there's no komi They're taking turns having black, so that evens it out. But after Go Seigen won 5 out of the first 6 games, the handicap changed to Go Seigen taking black only 1 in 3 games, I believe it was. There's no komi, and they have 11 hours each in this match. And so it actually, although I have it down as December 21st, it lasted for 3 days. So they adjourned the game twice, and they played it over a 3-day period, up to 12:23. That's according to, it was interesting, I researched it. I found on the internet, when I looked at the databases, they had a different date, but I checked it out in this book, which is, okay, it's not working with the background. But this book is Go Seigen's, it's his a full collection of his games, and in this collection they do have it in December, the 21st to the 23rd. So yes, just to get caught up to that, and so this is very normal now to play an extension there. Another move that would have been considered normal in this era would be to play a sanensei. So that could be played with or without the kakari in the lower left corner. In fact, one of Go Seigen's openings that he liked to try would be to play 2 approach moves on the left and then play a sanensei, aiming to dominate either the top side or the lower side. So even throughout the 20th century and until we had AlphaGo or similar programs, people weren't so afraid of 3-3 invasions. So nowadays, the computer would immediately tell you to invade here or one of the other corners. It wasn't considered a successful way for white to play, so they would just play the old-fashioned joseki probably, and people would think that it's good for black. Of course, the way we look at that has changed now. So quite often now you would actually see black playing something like this to stop white from getting into the 3-3 point. So that's how a game has changed just in the last few years. But he plays the extension, and as I was saying, you would have a computer telling you to get into one of those 3-3 points. Maybe this one, but it could actually be the 3-3 point in the upper right first. But no one did that at the time, and it was considered normal to play an approach move on the outside. So white is playing an approach move on the side without pincering black stone. So it's the wide side, which is according to theory. And black pincers. So again, it's considered a good idea for black to be inviting white into the 3-3 point. So that's what black is doing here. It's another point where you would probably see something different, like you could see something like this with if white hanes, then black would close off the corner. You might see something like this. And actually nowadays, although the proverb tells you to play a hane against the attachment, computer programs will often tell you to extend, and you get into something like this. So this kind of stuff could happen with black. Basically what black is trying to do is to make it more difficult for white to get into the corner. So an attachment play like this, something like that, more involved in protecting the 3-3 point. But this is actually inviting white into the 3-3 point. And naturally, white should jump in. So we know that now. And this is actually was a very common game, common move at the time also. And the difference is that people would always play maybe here, and something like this would be a standard joseki. Or to play like this, in which case white would be hoping to play a hanedashi next. And the joseki that was considered normal at the time would be to protect against the weakness by jumping here. Although, again, nowadays, and at the time also, you would see people playing away a bit. For instance, something like this. Again, the 3-3 point in the upper left corner would be an option, or black could play the kakari here. And black would fight when white plays here. So black would be able to fight with that. In this board position, black would probably continue playing away, actually, and just treat it as light, which does make sense in a way. But the way white plays this has changed now, And this is something that changed when we had AlphaGo playing against top professionals. Let's see, was that... Offhand, I don't even remember the year. I think it was 1995 or 7, 1997 maybe, when AlphaGo went onto the internet, and mostly it was called Master, and it was playing against top professional players. All of the players who played against it, a lot of them were using handle names at the time, so it was sort of hard to tell who was who. But they were all in the top, I think they were all in the top 30 professional ranking. So there were a number of players who played more than one game, but they were all top players, mostly Chinese. The Chinese players seemed, 2017, thank you, Rick. I think the Chinese were sort of, there was a connection there. So they knew what was going on earlier than most people, and the great majority of the players were Chinese, but they did invite some top Korean players. And from Japan, Iyama did participate. And in some of the games there, we would see AlphaGo playing here, which is still normal, was still considered normal, that is. But instead of playing the Joseki move here, it played this way. So it was a different board position. But this was a pretty shocking thing. It's bumping against the stone at the head of 2 stones, so this is supposed to be good for black. But the whole point is that this gives, if black plays a double hane here, this gives white a tempo. So white gets to jump into another 3-3 point in this case. And AlphaGo and modern computer programs like this for white. And it's still something that, it sort of goes against the grain. Bumping against it, 7 is supposed to be a, we thought it was a bad move. But this is how people would play it now. Not surprising that Seigen and Kitani did not know about that. And white jumps out. So when white doesn't want to go into the 3-3 point, what white would do here is that white would jump out and press here. So this was a very popular move from about this time and throughout the 20th century. So it lasted into this century. Leonardo, are you just trying to confuse me? The only real one was the Shinfuseki, the one that Seigen and Kitani invented. And nothing after that had the same impact. So I wouldn't call anything. I'd say that the computer, what people are calling the AI revolution, is equal in its impact, at least. But people don't really call it a new Fuseki. They're calling it the AI Fuseki. So black kicks here. This is actually, it's a common move. It gives white the opportunity to play here. This is actually a variation that was played a bit at the time. And black would play here. Locally, black can attach here. And this is setting up, if white ignored it, black would be able to wedge here. And this would not be very good for white. So white would answer just by capturing the 1 stone. And black would be able to develop the lower side. So this is something black could follow up with. So this was a fairly common way of playing, but in the game white extends down here. So this is a stronger way to play. White's still looking at the 3-3 point here and various things, like looking at the 3-3 point, the invasion. If white does get to, for instance, let's put some white stones down. If white gets to invade the lower side, this black group in the corner would still be very unstable with the 3-3 point wide open. This is the kind of situation where black's kick here could potentially become a bad move. It would be strengthening white while not fully protecting the corner. So when black is kicked here, you have to remember that this is kind of an imperfect position locally. And the fact that black is going to maintain a connection towards the left is what makes it feasible, what makes it good for black to have this weakness in the corner. It's not a problem provided black is connected up on the whole side. Then it's just a matter of territory. We're actually going to see that played out. So black pushes and curls around. And this is close enough to the standard Joseki, in which white would be playing here. and extending a bit. And black would be looking at a wedge at P7, a wedge here. So this would be able to, if white played away, for instance, black would be able to do that, and this would be very effective in cutting white up. So this would just be too dangerous for it. If black did that prematurely, it would change things. So for instance, if black did it here, for instance, if black did the same thing, this race to capture is a bit dangerous for black. Could be Derek Neal, yes. Some of the basic things did not change, but a lot of those complicated josekis that we were so fond of, like the avalanche joseki, and some variations of the taisha have just disappeared. And in some cases, we've even sort of figured out why they weren't good because of computers. So yes, going back to this variation, white would not play away, but would play something to defend this weakness here. And that would be a fairly even result, I guess. Instead, white plays here. Of course, we have to remember there's no komi. Kitani was, throughout his life, he was pretty innovative with joseki playing. So he's playing something pretty much original. And by not extending here, I think it's important to try to understand what he's trying to set up, because he played very unusual moves, and it's very difficult to copy him. Like, I'd say one of his students who is similar in some ways would be Chochi-kun, who was a student of Kitani. And he was similar in that they were both very good at invading opponents' positions. So you'll actually see Kitani invade the position on the right side later. I think that by giving black more room on the outside, on the right side here, Kitani is actually trying to set up an invasion later in the game. And we're going to see that happen. So he plays here. And again, this is dealing with the double threat here, the peep. So by jumping here, white is getting rid of the peep and is threatening to jump in here. So that's what white is doing with that move. And black protected. So that sort of makes sense. And now white peeps. I love this move. So white's peeping at a point that is already connected. So black could play away, or could play here, for instance, and white would not be able to cut here. Sorry, I'm using the wrong tool still. So white would not be able to cut here because they're both hanging connections. So it's sort of interesting that white would be peeping at a point where white cannot cut. It's sort of funny. But actually, white does have the hane on this side, which would be setting up, it would be setting up the connection here. So you could say that's what white is looking at. Of course, if white does it immediately, black gets to cut here. It's not such a great success for white. So I think what white was going to do is white was going to protect here and make it into a kind of a double threat. Because if black plays on this side, white can pincer on this side. And now white's shape here is well connected. It's a pretty strong shape. White's given some territory to black on the lower side, some extra territory, but white now has a strongly connected position and can be attacking strongly. So in this case, this would be a kind of a very strong attack. Let's see, I think white would probably do something like this. Let's see. Or if black answers on the other side, then white would be able to break through here. So this would be bad for black. Okay, let's see. So white peeps and black actually just connected here. And by connecting here, black is keeping the pressure on this group on the outside. So by connecting here, it looked like black didn't need that. But by doing that, it does put more pressure on the white group on the outside, with the double peep here still kind of annoying. It can be annoying in some positions. And white jumps into the 3-3 point. So this is what white was aiming at. White was aiming at this 3-3 point. If black plays here, white can connect and will be alive underneath. So that's the general idea. Black actually pushed through once. And this is a good move. So this is actually giving white a choice. Sometimes it's better to give a choice than like this. This would be forcing white to live in the corner, but white would be living on a larger scale than white did in the game. When black gives white a choice here, white has two directions to play. In the game, white actually played underneath, and black got to play this exchange before covering here. So getting that exchange in was a beneficial exchange for black. Otherwise, white could have played here, and this would connect up to the side. When white does this, there's no point in black connecting here, because even if white answers this, cutting here has been, it's not even bothering white. White's alive in the corner. Black has actually created a weakness here that's more pronounced, and so white's going to be okay in the center too. So black hasn't really accomplished anything with this sequence. He's cutting what we call dame points, or pointless move. So black would play a hane here, and this would be a bit annoying. So if black plays here and white plays here, now black can push through once before connecting. And so this would be, white would still have a very weak group on the outside. Not very good. So white might cut here, but then black would have, white wouldn't, black would be able to play away basically. Black would play here. In this case, white covering at 5 is no longer a forceful move. So it's maybe a bit slow for white. So instead of going this way, white plays the hane here and connects. So if black answers on this side, white would be able to connect here. This would connect everything up and make a strong group. So that would be good for white. So it's good for black at this timing to push through here. White captures this stone, and black just sacrifices it. So if black rolled here, maybe black could capture the corner. White has about 6 liberties, so it would take a lot of trolling. And at any point, there's no way for black to win the race to capture. So like, if black wanted to win the race to capture, it would be black would have to play like this, and black has 5 liberties, and white has only 4, but white would take this opportunity to run away. So this would it would be bad for black anyway. Even if black manages to capture the corner, it's going to be very painful, and white's going to squeeze from the outside. So black would not want to do that. Definitely not. So black plays this way, and here. It seems such a natural move. Black is focusing on this weakness here. But one interesting thing I saw with AlphaGo. Yes, exactly, Bugcat. I agree with you. People come back and back to the Kamakura Jubango. I think it's, although the two players, they were still only 7-dan professional, that was a time when the only 9-dan, I believe, was Rainbow Shusai, who was the Meijin. So he was 9-dan in the old system, and they were just starting on the 9-dan. So they didn't have anyone stronger than these two players, really. I think they were the strongest players of their time. And the fact that it was a Jubango, it wasn't a kind of a tournament system, I think that allowed them to play very interesting games. You can see them trying all sorts of stuff throughout the 10 games. For instance, the game number 1, I'll put that's one that is really worth going to watch. So I'll put the link down. I'll put the link here again. I'll put it in the chat. I should put it in the description after I'm finished. And the first game was a wild one, and you're going to see Kitani doing all sorts of interesting stuff in this game also. But yes, it's one of the I think it sort of defines that era with the two strongest players playing, and they're playing. They're not so worried about winning each and every game. They're treating it as a kind of a sequence of 10 games, and I think they're sort of testing each other out at this point. So that makes it interesting in a different way. Okay, so what I was going to say is that I was interested by the fact that the computer program was, every time it was saying that this was a big move for white to play. And so there were a number of positions already in this video, in this commentary, that I've talked about this move. Reducing black on the right side, this is actually pretty according to theory as we had it before. So this would allow black to surround the side, and in some cases white's going to be aiming at that 3-3 point in the upper right. So for instance now. And a variation something like this maybe. So invading the 3-3 point in the upper right is so valuable that white sort of wants to reduce from above, reduce and allow black to surround the right side, because white can reduce it with the 3-3 point finally. So leading up to the 3-3 point, just making it the optimal move is how it works. And this is actually something that we see in professional games before AlphaGo. But it's sort of characteristic of Kitani that he didn't want to go that way. I think a lot of players would have been playing somewhere along this line. And in this case, although I'd said this is sort of annoying, white would have ideas of sacrificing these two stones also. And they wouldn't be so important if white's allowing black to surround the right side. They're no longer sort of cutting stones, because black's going to be strong on both sides. Kitani is still setting up an invasion on the right side. And Seigen knows that, so he's going to let that happen, actually. It's good for black to be enlarging the right side now. He extends once. And now white's group, it's okay for the time being. This group, in a pinch, it can make an eye here. And it has sort of an eye. So there's a potential eye here, it would be a bit painful for white to actually have to make that. But white does have kind of a potential eye in this area, and white's out in the center. So for the time being, white's okay. And now black plays this move. So this is actually challenging Kitani to a fight. And this is where the game starts to get interesting. A solid move would be something like this. I think they all wear they wore Japanese style dress at the time. Leonardo, yeah. So it is. This is a picture from that about that time. Although I think it's a different game, actually. The picture I'm showing you here. And they did dress like that. They could sometimes dress in suits, but not when they played Ko. I think the idea that they were on tatami mats, Japanese style room with mats sitting on the floor, I think it made the Japanese clothes actually easier for them. Whereas I think a suit would be better adjusted to sitting in a modern room with a chair and stuff. I think actually, and I see a lot of this with Seigen and Kitani. I think they know each other so well. They played a lot of games. They're best friends and stuff. They know what the opponent is sort of leading up to. And they want to see how it's going to turn out. So this is a kind of a challenge where it would have been equally valid, actually. With no komi, this would have been good enough to win the game. But it would have led to a more mundane, less exciting game. So he's challenging Kitani to a fight here, because when black plays here, completely finishing off the potential for white to live in the corner, he's stopping white from taking some territory. So like if black had played here, white would still have the option of playing an approach move. Some players would play a submarine attack here, something like that, and black would be confined to just this area at the most. But when black plays this way, black is going for a bit more and a more efficient way of surrounding the right side, and so white's sort of obliged to jump in. So this is where he starts, and this is an amazingly good move. It's a move where black has three ways to answer this peep. So this is actually a kind of a lesson of how to peep the cut there. You peep diagonally like this, where white could have peeped here. This would have been forcing, and actually, sometimes computer plays moves like this. So you could play this way, but when you peep like this, black actually has 3 ways to answer. And the point is that compared to this diagram, so just comparing these two, having that white stone not touching the black wall is better for white. When it's touching the wall, it has less potential to be doing something. Whereas when it's not touching the wall, it has more room to move around and start making a shape here. So it's in a better position when this happens. So that's the basic idea of playing peep from the diagonal. And if black answers here, in this case, this is actually working for white because white has a potential connection here. The monkey jump tsuji here. And because of that, white's group on the right side is not going to get into trouble. So that's the advantage that white would potentially have if black plays the hanging connection from above. And of course, if black plays a hanging connection from below, this just gives white the extra forcing move here. So that would make it relatively easy for white to be moving out. So that's probably not a good move. So it's probably correct that black connected here. And it's just a comparison of let's see, where did I put that variation? It's just a comparison of this diagram and this diagram. It's better to have the white stone not touching. Okay, Army, Navy, and Air Force. I don't really go for analogies like that. It's sort of difficult to make it work sometimes. Okay, so black plays the capping move. So one thing that's important in this fight is that black has a group here that is not alive. The corner group is probably pretty strong, but it does have an open side here on the left. Obviously, white's group is weak. So black's idea is going to be to keep this group that I've marked. Let's I'll get rid of the mark. Black wants to keep this group stronger than the white group. That's the one thing that black has to be careful of. But also, black doesn't want to make it too easy for white to live in the corner. So when white plays here, black could have surrounded the white group, but this would allow white to make a life inside. So this would be a living shape, and it would be, black would still have to try to get some profit somewhere, probably on the top side, but it's usually better for black to take away white's eye. So when black does this is the game move. When black does this, the question is black going to be able to keep the black group stronger than the white group? So it's these two groups here. The balance of strength is what's important. And the idea is that this black group is probably going to continue to be stronger. There's the fact that white has another group that's not fully settled on this side. So I agree with this. It's probably a very important move and when you're attacking, there's this idea that you want to surround, but if you can't capture, sometimes that doesn't work. So this is a good example of that, where it's better for black to take away the space, which is just a few points for white, but it's a few points for black too. And it's creating a peep here, which would potentially connect the black group up. And so there's some extra security for black's group on the outside. And it's pretty big. So if it's a few points for black and it's a few points for white, it's getting close to 10 points. So it's a significant difference in territory. And there's the value of a continuing attack against the white group. And black extends on the top side. So these are the two moves, I would say, that black wanted to play to improve this position here. So black had this pillar of stones here. But if it had been attacked by a white move from the side, so for instance, if white got to play the move at p17, then that would be hitting a weak point in black's position. So it's important that black is developing it with this move at n17. S11, S11, S11. Ah, yes. Yes. Yes, when you're talking about the aji of the cut, that's TATV, it depends on whether you actually are interested in using it from the other side. So another way to use that, that's a good point, so let's take a look at it. So yeah, in this position, when white plays the peep here, looking at the aji of the cut, it's actually the peep is making use of it. But the only other way that white could make use of that aji would be to fill one of these liberties and force black to connect, which would be, we can see already that it's not a very useful move, and that white is already connected up here. So I think the fact that white already has a very solid connection, doesn't have any local moves in this area that white really needs to play, that doesn't have a huge need to play any of those moves, is what makes this so effective, using it from the other side. And the point I was trying to make here is that white's whole plan here, playing an unusual variation of this whole joseki with the connection on the 5th line, and the whole sequence after that was very unusual. White was purposely giving black a lot of space here because he wanted to jump in, and he was setting this whole thing up. So you could say that he was setting this move up for a few dozen moves already, and just taking the perfect timing to do it. So up to this point, and black is attacking while taking territory. This is a very normal way for black to continue the attack. And with this move, white has cut off the black group on the outside. So white has cut this group off. It doesn't really have any eyes. And so white's trying to make the difference in strength of the two groups somewhat similar. So after black has played this key point on the top side, black is already happy about how black has developed this group. So this is when black stops playing moves to develop that group. Black doesn't really need to be in a hurry to play any more moves on the top side. It's more important now that white has cut the black group in the center off. Black's going to continue with moves that reinforce the center. So it's very logical the way black is continuing the fight here. Actually, when Go Seigen has black, and the fact that all of these games in this period of time, most of the games were no komi, the new tournament, the Hoinbo tournament, I believe since they were using, I think some of the games were played in the tournament system, even in the round robin league, they wanted to get results. So they started using komi. I think they started with a 4.5 point komi in the Hoinbo tournament, but otherwise, all of the games that they played, and still the OTI, which was the ranking tournament, was a very important tournament in Japan. I think it was sponsored most of the time. So they were playing no komi games, and Go Seigen's game is relatively easy to understand when he has black, because when he feels that he's moving towards a winnable position, he tends to simplify the game. And we're going to see some of that later when he makes all these trades. And you usually would be confused by trades. He calculates it, and if he's satisfied with the trade, he's going to do it, and it actually simplifies the game. Okay, older games tended to be peaceful. That's a point that Joris Vanderbroek is making, and it's true. But they did have these running fights. I think it depends on the player. Another player that I'm going to have fun showing you some games at some point is Hoinbo Joa, who was he was in the 19th century, I believe, so even earlier, and he was a wild fighter. So it depends on the style of the players. Usually the fact that black tended to play very solidly did make it difficult for white to start fights, and so the games did tend to be relatively peaceful. But it does depend on the players. And in the 20th century now, they did do a lot of fighting. I should at some point show you some games from the Shinfuseki era, which will be extremely difficult to explain because they're really wild and they play these weird openings, which lead to huge fights. So I wouldn't say it's so true of this period in the mid 20th century. And so white plays here. So this was a very instructive move. White could have just connected. And black would probably connect also. But this white group, it doesn't have very much in the way of eyes. So we could have black play this move. Black could curl here with sente. And in this position, white has no eyes at all. So it's a way white could have played, but it would be weak in eye space. So with this move, white is threatening to break into the black territory. Black answers. And white's actually making a kind of a semi-eye. It's not a complete eye, but white does have a potential eye here. And so he's making some eye space. And now he covers here. And this is a move that black could have played. Black could have played that point. I would have probably played it myself. This would have taken away white's eyes, and it would have been sente. And so I would have wanted to play this exchange. But I think Go Seigen is focusing more on dominating the full board position, and the fact that there's no komi makes it, he's willing to allow white to play two moves and make a living shape. And so actually this whole fight, white is going to make a living shape, but it's working in a way for black also because black has established a territory here in the corner, which is about 20 points. And it's a fairly sizable territory. So black is getting that territory, and hopefully black is going to get a strong position towards the center of the board. So they say attack with the capping move. So that's the boshi here. And so when black does that, the natural question is what happens if white pokes out? So if white does this, black's going to be moving out towards the center. And the whole point of these capping moves, so in this variation, which is sort of hypothetical, but it's an example of black reinforcing the center while white plays these three moves. So it took white a total of 3 moves to get around the capping move. So because black played here, it made white sort of curve around that, and it took white 3 moves. So these 3 moves, in this case, it's given black 2 moves in the center, which settled this black group, and black also got a 3rd move here. So basically, if we just look at the 3 moves there, it took white 3 moves to get around the 1 black stone, means black gained the move. So if we compare it to, for instance, if black had simply played something like this to start with, white would make the same distance in just 1 move. So it's an extra move that the capping move gains when white has to curl around it. So that's an example of how capping moves, or boshis, will how they work when you're in an attacking position. They're generally used to make it difficult for your opponent to move in that direction, stopping white for the time being. And quite often the capping stone is not the important stone. It's just a stone that's getting in the way for a while and slowing your opponent down. So for the time being, white made some eye space. So with this move, white's accomplishing 2 things. For one thing, white has 1 eye here, so that's already an eye. So for instance, even if black plays here, white has multiple ways of making this eye. White could play here, or white could play like this to make an eye there. Of course, this move was the more important move. So it's not necessarily that white is going to play that sequence immediately, but if white does, white has an eye at this point. So white already has an eye on the right side, and so black got to play here, saving the 1 stone with sente. That's part of white's calculation, obviously. So white is, by playing this stone here, white is setting up a possible attack here. So this would work later. In the game, black partially defended against it. So the idea here is that, for instance, if black plays some other move, white can play here. For the time being, this is net, so white cannot escape with this stone itself, but white can squeeze from this side. So white would be able to get some extra squeezing moves, and it would actually be, it would turn things around probably. It would actually, black would have to start thinking about making ice base. So that's how white's threat there is working, and black handled it by playing the Kosumi here. So this does not completely get rid of the Aji here. White would probably actually start from this side if white wanted to make use of it. White could push through and cut here, and if black plays away, then this is going to be trouble. So this would be a direct attack on the 6 stones in the center, and it would set up cutting black off on the right. So if white does that, black would probably answer at 4. And for the time being, white's not alive yet. So I said white has an eye here, and it only has a potential eye here. So if at some point black plays this move, that's not going to be an eye. And so white has to be careful of that group. White doesn't really have enough time to make a strong attack against black here. So white started with this move, and black actually played here. So this is a move that I did not see coming, to be frank. But it is completely getting rid of the Aji here. So now if white plays here, it will be, there's no Aji attached to that. It's not creating any shortage of liberties for black anymore. The reason I didn't see this move was that I would probably be thinking of playing something just a little bit more loose, like this, for instance, or like this. But when I think about it, it's hard to say whether this is less effective. I think it's combined with the idea that now white's okay on the side there, but black is going to follow up with this move. So he's actually making some space here. And if he turns this into a territory, maybe it's actually better for black to have the stone connected on the outside. He's getting some extra points there. So there's the idea of getting rid of the damizmari, the shortage of liberties possibility connected to white's attack here. And the idea that he's going to add a stone to it anyway. He's making a larger space. And this is putting just a little bit of pressure on the white group here. And white answered here. So this sort of finished the local fight. And as Leonardo was saying, white does have some potential on the right side. So black could have continued, for instance, locally, the local fight here. At any point, if white plays this move or this move, white's going to have 2 eyes. So it's not as if black is making a huge attack here. This would be one way for black to try to reduce the top side. But instead, he just jumped into the 3-3 point. So this is a move that it looks so much like what people do in modern Go now, with computers always telling us to jump the 3-3 point. And it works sort of, in this case, the fact that black has a corner group sticking out here and has reduced from the center to a certain degree. I think what's happening here is that he's okay with the idea that maybe white is going to surround the top side. So he's going to give the top side to white. And when that happens, he's going to be able to play endgame moves like this from the corner, or he's going to be able to play reducing moves from the center, like one of these 2 triangles. So he's okay with white surrounding the top side. And when you assume that, suddenly the 3-3 point becomes an important move. So it's interesting to see here how some things they just didn't change. And this is a sequence that we're starting here. It's a sequence that could have been played in a modern game also. And white actually plays the double hane and takes the corner. And every time I show someone this joseki, what I say is that this tends to be good for black early in the game. So like if we started in the first 20-30 moves, usually this is going to give black a better score. when this happens. It's going to give black a boost in the score. But as the game progresses and the center of the board becomes less valuable, and the center and the sides, so they're sort of related in this case, the corner territory becomes more and more important. So taking the corner like this becomes a more and more valuable move as the game develops and there becomes less potential, you might say, on the outside. In this case, it's the left side and the center of the board. And so it becomes a move that is less likely to reduce white's score. And so actually the way they play is a feasible way to play. And it makes sense. And we are getting close to 100 moves. It's in the middle game. And black extends on the left side. And so black has dealt with most of white's potential on the left side of the board. So white has 10 points in the corner and some potential territory here. I would say this is something like maybe 15 points if white makes it. So white has 10 points plus that potential. White has a few points in the corner and nothing much else. Everything is small. If we look at black's territory, I would call this area black territory. That's almost 20 points. It's more than 10. Black has an area here. Black has some small areas here. So if we look at it as a no komi game, which is what this is, black does seem to have a small lead. If we look at the territories, this territory is the one that is not completely defined. So this is where white is going to try something. Actually, if this is a komi game, it would be fairly close. White curls around. This is kind of an emergency move because the local move that is generally a good move is to play the knight's move. So this would be much better shape, but in this board position, it would probably not be forcing. So black would probably be, like in a modern game, you would probably see computers suggesting stuff like this. I think that, I don't think I would see Go Seigen playing this move. Maybe he would be sliding here or jumping towards the center. Something to reinforce this area here would be a valuable move. And I think if black can get something like 20 points in this area and everything else is okay, black seems to be maintaining a lead. So white curls around. So basically if he plays away, let's just give white a random move. I think the idea is that this would be a very effective move for black later in the game, with ideas of sort of connecting up to the center here and making a huge area. So that's what black is doing, trying to do, and what white is preventing black from doing with this. White's okay with the group on the right. And this is it's got one eye with a potential eye, so it's going to be okay. It's the Joseki choice here in the upper left was mainly because as the game progresses, the corners get more and more valuable. So taking the corner was valuable in this case. So white peeps here. So this is where sometimes in Kitani's games, when he does stuff like this, it's magical. And this move, there's nothing happening here. And it's an asking move, asking how black answers it. So for instance, even if black had played here, it's not as if there's anything drastically damaging that will happen here. He would probably just play something elsewhere on the board like this. He would probably reduce the lower side in this case with just a little bit extra aji related to white's moves like this or white's moves underneath like this, curling around and looking at the cuts sometimes. So there's just a little bit of aji related to this exchange here, some potential. And so he's just making a little bit more in potential. It's an asking move, asking how black is going to answer it. Black answers playing strongly, trying to swallow it up on a large scale. Nothing's happening here. So if white cuts, black can just play on this side. And black has enough liberties on the right to be able to win this. So it's not, maybe black would fill a liberty actually. Black could fill a liberty here. Black has a number of ways of capturing these two stones. So now white plays here, and we're going to see how white is setting up this. So like this, and white cuts here. So now, when black played this strong move, it's hard to say that there's nothing happening here. Yes, I did study with Go Seigen in his study group when he was a very old man at the time, but he would look at our games and give us advice. And he also, sometimes he talked about his own games. He talked about the game number 1 of this series, which was a very exciting game, and it also shows the different styles of Kitani and Go Seigen. So yeah, but I don't. He didn't talk about this game in particular, but he did talk about some of his games and episodes from his earlier life. And so when white cuts here, in the game, black started a ko here. So black actually doesn't really have a good way to stop white from doing anything. Because if, for instance, if black answers on this side, this is the easy one, because white can capture 2 stones here, and black's group on the right would be in some trouble also. So black doesn't want to do that. If black just connects here, black can handle that. But there's going to be some trouble on this side. So that's what white was doing with these 2 stones here, setting up something on the left. So white would continue with this move, and black has multiple ways to try to save the 3 stones. But they all lead to a shortage of liberty. So for instance, if black just does something like, if black does this, then white would be able to break through on this side, and black can't cut. So if black cuts here, that's a double threat. So black can't do it that way. If black connects this way, white does have this move. So white can squeeze here and play here, and black cannot connect in this case either. So there's stuff happening here. And black plays an Atari. So I think the idea here is that if white answers like this, then black would have forcing moves like this and would be able to protect on this side. And in this case, black would be okay. So white plays the ko and plays this ko threat. So this is a point where it was interesting. I was looking at the game with AlphaGo, and when I put it at 7.5 point komi or 6.5 point komi, AlphaGo would be saying that black has to play here. And they would continue the ko. So black would continue the ko somehow. Maybe connect here or play something on the outside. It would still be a ko. And when in the game, black connected here. The record of the game says that he spent 50 minutes on this one move. So he spent a good amount of time. Go Seigen was generally a very fast player. So the fact that he spent 50 moves on this one move, it does make it a significant move. And I think he was evaluating the whole board position and deciding whether he could go on to win this game after making this trade. And you know, it looks exciting when you do a trade like this, because black is losing a whole group there on the right. 6 stones, it's pretty big. But the fact that the group dies, actually, it does help to simplify the game, because that group's not going to be fighting white anymore. And all of the white groups, obviously, are more secure. And the trade-off is that black also, he gets this forcing move. Black's position on the lower side is much more stable than it was. Just because black has won that ko and connected it, this solid connection here, it got rid of all of the bad aji. So it simplified the game for both sides. There's less groups that the players have to worry about. More potential for black to take it into an endgame. And yes, Marcelo, yes, he was playing, Kitani was playing his famous territorial style. When I finally get to the later games in this series, I will be showing you some games where Kitani takes territory and it works splendidly. So like when it works, it's very spectacular. He can take territory, handle a weak group, and that's it. Like he finishes the game way ahead in territory. And there's some of his games against Go Seigen where that works really well. And then some games where Go Seigen's attack. Generally, you see Go Seigen attacking him and Kitani taking the territory. Yes, so yes. And so the Katago decision did change a little bit when I adjusted it to a no komi. And it still didn't like black making this trade, but it was just a reduction in the number of points that black can win the game. And so you could say that in a way it agreed with his decision here. So here white has to answer. If white plays away, black can cut here and connect. So this would actually win the race to capture on the right. Black cuts off here. This is already bad for white. But the group here also, it's short of liberty. So black would be able to, this group here is short of liberties. So black would be able to throw in here. So this is the tesuji which would reduce white's liberties by forcing white to connect all those points. So if white plays on this side, the continuation like this would be forcing white to fill all of those liberties there, and black would win like this. And when white connects there, it is a ko, but it's what they call in Japan a flower viewing ko, or I think in some places they call it a picnic ko. This would be a win for black, so white would have to fight the ko at this point. So this would be a very difficult ko for white to play, even locally. And black has already gained a lot by cutting white off in the center. So this would be out of the question. So white answered. With this, white has established a fairly large territory on the right side. But as I say, it's simplified the game. So with this move, black is finished. So here there was still some potential for white to squeeze black. So that's what I was talking about when I showed you this move. White can squeeze black here, and black will have to put a stone in. So there's this sequence where white can squeeze black a little bit still on the lower side and establish a territory in the corner. So that would be a very big move for white to be able to play. It would start with white playing this move. But as I said, for the time being, white has to deal with this. So the fact that black gets to this point is very important in the calculation of black succeeding in this whole trade here. So with this trade, black has established a lead, assuming there's no komi. So here again, we see white trying to set something up. He's trying to play an annoying move here. Black can capture it here, and white tries to play a forcing move here. So this white stone, it's not dead yet. So what white is doing is white is trying to force black to put a stone in to capture that, which would be a relatively inefficient move. And so by doing this, the game would gradually get closer and closer. In this case, white would be able to move to this side, probably something like this, and start building the upper side. After forcing black to play at 1, it's okay for white to allow black to do stuff like this to extend towards the center. That stone at 1 could potentially become a wasted move. So he's playing this sequence here where he's threatening black locally, but black doesn't really want to protect like this. So black plays on the outside. This does not completely capture the white stone. And so this kind of conversation going along here is something that I find very interesting. I enjoy it. L18. L18 is not small, but as we're seeing in the game, playing from above is, for the time being, it's more important. So that's a good question, Thumper, but yeah. Generally, you fix the shape. You want to decide what's happening on the 5th line here, and then L18 is just a purely endgame move. Even if white played that move, I think the corner group there would be nothing significant in the corner. So that would be a question. Like if white plays M18, is there some follow-up in the corner? That would be something you'd have to figure out. But it looks like to me like it's not there, which means that it's more important to play in the center, and then L18 would be a final move played later on. Leonardo, they didn't leave a record of how much tea. Kitani was a tea drinker, I agree, yes. But I don't know. So this is the move that white had been threatening to play if black answers carelessly here, white would be able to push through and cut and save the stones like this. That would be significantly big. So black answers here, an empty triangle, but it's putting pressure on the white group. It's still putting pressure on white. So, yeah, so let's just take that forward a bit. An in-between move here that I don't fully understand. And here. So if black cuts here, white can push through and cut here, threatening to cut on the right, and then can capture these two stones, the 3 stones, that is. So that's what white is threatening, and black has to extend. So white cuts, another forcing move, and white can escape with this. So this is really, it's a sort of an ugly move. If black plays here, white does have a seki. So this would be a success for white with a seki there locally, and all sorts of weaknesses for black on the outside. So for immediately, black would have to deal with the potential cut here. And also there's a vital point in black's shape. If white plays the h10 point, that would be threatening to cut black on the right. And all of these black stones, these stones, and these stones, they're connected to the seki. So if white managed to capture any of those stones, that would win the stones inside the seki would die also. So that's why black would be scrambling to save all those stones. This would be bad. Otherwise, black could make a ko of it by playing here, but this would be a ko like this. So that would be another option. White seems to have some ko threats in this area. So white would be planning on using those, I suppose. Instead, black just connected. And this does set up a cut here. So white plays like this, escapes, but black gets to cut. So when black does this, this is already starting to, we're coming to the final stage of the game. You can see when this kind of stuff happens, black's sort of glad that he didn't hurry to play L18. So it's another example of how this, when stuff like this can suddenly happen in the center of the board, you don't really want to hurry to play the L18 move until you've fixed the center first. So yes, white curls around. Yes, so with this move, if white had tried to save these stones, black would just play something like this, and is already threatening to capture white with a stone here. And at this point, black would have a choice of covering on the right or the left. Covering on the right would be the simpler way to play, and white has no way to escape. So there's nothing really that white can do on the top side, and white played here. And had to sacrifice these 2 stones. So white's actually lost a lot of territory here, and is hoping to get something back and attack in the center of the board. So white is cutting black off, and plays this key point here. This is actually going to be fairly dangerous if black tries to save everything. So like if black had now played a move something like this, this would be alive, it would be connected, but it would also be, the whole group would not be alive. So this would be potentially very dangerous. It would give white an opportunity to try to kill everything. So he doesn't really want to do that. And you have to remember that black has already gained something on the top here. So black's strategy, Seigen's strategy here of sacrificing something is very instructive, I think, because he's going to sacrifice 6 more stones. He doesn't have to save everything because he's already cast in on the top side. And so simplifying the game is much more important. And you have to remember that he's probably calculated this just going back to this point where he accepted the challenge and refused to play a move to finish off that white stone. When he played here, he has to be aware of the fact that white can move out here. And so he's already ready to do some kind of trade like this. And must have the idea that when white does this, he's ready to sacrifice some of his stones. And the weakness in white's position is the cut here, because white cannot immediately capture it. If white plays here, black plays here, white can't cut here, obviously, because it's an Atari. and so white can't capture that. So that's the weakness that white has. Black could even play here and squeeze from this side, and that would be good enough. In this variation, black would be able to save everything. So white plays this forcing move and connects, and is trying to struggle his way through this, but I think this is already completely read out by black. So black plays this forcing move, and it's the weakness that white has on the right. So for instance, if white plays something like this, white's actually going to lose to the 3 black stones on the right. So this white group in the center is short of liberties and can be squeezed like this, and white immediately loses the race to capture. So white can't even win that race, and it has to connect up like he did in the game, and now black plays here. So by playing this exchange, black has extended the liberties of these 3 stones and is going to win the race to capture. So if we assume white plays here, in some cases black will want to avoid the Aji ko. We're going to see a position where black's going to want to do that. White can cut black off. At this point, black has 4 liberties, and white has only 3. So black's winning the race to capture. So it's significant that black can afford to connect it too, getting rid of any potential bad Aji on the outside, and is still winning the race to capture. So yeah, finally, now this is just desperate. He's setting up a resignation at this point. So at this point, I don't think white really has a realistic chance to win the game. White can capture these 6 stones. So I was interested in focusing on the original sacrifice of this group in a trade to connect the ko, which settled this fight was still continuing up to that point. So he settled the fight. And with this exchange, black moved the game forward to what looked like an endgame. And then white challenged black to another fight in the center of the board. When this happens, when white does something like this, saying, are you going to back down and add a stone to this group? If black does back down in that fashion, in many cases the game will get gradually closer and closer. Every time white will make a subtle challenge like this, and maybe be gaining only a point or so every time black backs off from the fight, just makes it closer and closer. The challenges become more and more dangerous in that the game is closer and it's more potential for white to catch up. So this kind of asking move, the previous peep that white did in the lower side, all of these things that white is doing in the context of the fact that the game black was leading. But white's trying to confuse things just a little bit, playing very fine borderline moves that are in between being, they're not exactly overplays. They're moves that are sort of on the borderline between being maybe reasonable and maybe not. So it's a very fine art of playing a move, these moves in the game when you're behind, trying to find a way to turn things around. So I think this is in that way, although it didn't really work for white, it's a demonstration of how to go about that when you're behind, how to try to make things happen, not by playing some outrageously unreasonable move, but by trying to find moves that are just sort of annoying and trying to complicate the game, make it more difficult for your opponent to find a straightforward way to victory. Because you can see that all this fighting here, it does complicate things for a bit. But with this move, and the whole idea of sacrificing those stones on the right, black did find a good way to escape from that. And the whole fact that he's extending his liberties here and winning the semi on the left. Let's just go through the game to the end here. I'm getting close to wrapping up, I think. And white has captured black in the center. So black actually sacrificed 6 stones twice, so it's a total of 12 stones that black sacrificed. But black was getting, in this case, second sacrifice gave black some territory on the top, and of course the first sacrifice gave black territory on the bottom. And now in this final fight, black is taking territory on the left side too. So black was getting stuff back, and it was a valid way for black to finish the game. at this point, white's group in the lower left corner is in trouble. And so now white is dead. If white connects here, black could just push through here, and it would be the double threat of saving the center stones and killing white on this side. So that would be good enough for black. And also in this kind of fight, it's still significant that, for instance, it's still significant that black can afford to answer this move on this side, because it's an example of how if black could not, there would be something that looks almost like a potential ko. Actually, it looks like it doesn't quite work for white. Black still has an extra liberty, so maybe not quite working. But you can see how there's some added oddsy there. If black could not have played at 9. But the fact that black can play this move makes it a lot easier for black. Okay, so I think I'm... so let's just go back to the game. That was the final game move. So when white played here and black played this move. This is when the game ended. I added those two moves. So this is how we finished the game. See if there's any good questions. I think I'm okay with the questions right now. Yes. Okay, Bugcat is asking about the Jubango. The end result was actually 6 wins for Go Seigen and 4 wins for Kitani. And some of those games are still very instructive and spectacular, actually. So I'm going to be, later on, sometime, I'll be finding time to show you some more of the games. Yeah, so white has captured a lot of stones on the right side and the center, but black had a lead in territory and profit on the top and the left. So that finishes off the game. I think my favorite moves. Actually, I'd say my favorite move maybe is white's move here. This is one of my favorite moves, definitely. And the whole fight in the center, where white is making these threats and black is refusing to back away from the fight, made it an interesting endgame. Like, if white had not been able to find this kind of threat, the game would have been relatively simple, and it would have been a mundane endgame with no fireworks, and black would have just won easily. At this level, he would have been able to do that. And so the fact that that Kitani set this thing up and Go Seigen let the fight be played out made it a lot more exciting for me. Okay, so I guess that's it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I can give you a Patreon link if people want teaching games. That can be done on Patreon, so you can take a look at my Patreon homepage. So I'll put that in here. And yes, it keeps me going. So a good way to support the channel if you go to Patreon. So thank you all. Thank you all for staying to the end of the broadcast. And I'll see you next time. And I will be trying to set up some kind of a schedule. It's sort of difficult with stuff happening in real life also. It's I would like to have a regular schedule at some point, but I'm not quite at that point yet. Just look forward to seeing it happen. And subscribe and turn on notifications so you can get the notifications of the lives coming up. All right, thank you. The video will stay on my channel, so you can look back at it again, or you can look at the other Kamakura game. The game number 1 is really exciting too. So I suggest people who haven't seen it yet or want to study it again, you can look at it at the link on my channel. So thank you everyone, and goodbye.